Namaste, my good friends, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Victor, and I help people navigate through their awakening process. Today, I'm going to share with you 7 signs that you're making phenomenal progress in your awakening. And I'll give you a hint. The signs are oftentimes, most of the time, initially labeled as you're doing something wrong. You're regressing. Things aren't going as they should. Oftentimes they indicate the exact opposite. And I'll explain why. Number 1 is you're experiencing, we'll say, above average or normal of the physical symptoms. The physical awakening symptoms like insomnia, aches and pains, chronic fatigue, irritability, ringing in your ears. So oftentimes you find that you get sick a lot. And that can combine with all the physical symptoms, and the experience of it, I fully admit, sucks big time. But when that happens, it's essentially a sign that you're going through like a rapid transmutation phase or process at that time. You're doing a lot of clearing, a lot of transformation, and that is being reflected to you in a physical way. Number 2 is surprising, unexpected, physical, like actual life events that many times they kind of suck when it happens, like losing your job or getting into a little car accident. Hopefully it's not too bad. You know, stuff like that on that level. Or like, oh shit, this thing just popped into my life, into my reality. And not only did it happen, but now it's inconveniencing me. It invoked a lot of my own like deep emotions, which is oftentimes why that happens. But anyway, that's a sign that you're ready for a big shift, a big healing, a big, and again, more transmutation, more a boost in your ascension. And it's, if anything, if you want to look at it this way, the absence of that is, in a sense, in this context, meaning you're stalled. And when you're like, you take that step forward vibrationally, then you, boom, attract the experience that your higher self knows is going to direct you and somehow benefit you in a fairly positive way of equal proportion to the significance of the event. If you lose your job and you go broke, well, you're probably going to make big money. It's going to inspire something in you, and you're going to probably find a much better way of earning a living that's going to be really awesome for you, just as an example. Number 3, as many like to call it, the dark night of the soul, which is just where it's a total mess on all levels. Basically, it feels like you're barely like able to wake up out of bed. Your life is just taking a negative spiral downward at a rate that you can't even fathom, like how it could be happening, just where you're like really at your wit's end. That is usually when you're about to have a freaking massive breakthrough. That is a good sign. It means you're making phenomenal progress. So even though hearing that when you're in that dark night, it might at the very most produce some sort of fleeting like, oh, okay, good, and then you're back in it, because in that time it's almost impossible to sustain any semblance of joy and contentment and security. You experience the opposite of all of that, but it's a good sign, man. You're going forward quickly, so you're attracting, again, whatever you go through in a negative sense, as far as allowing yourself to experience and uncover your own inner demons and baggage and stuff. As that happens, yes, it manifests in your experience as a dark night of the soul type scenario, but as that, it's like night. That's like the night, the dark night of the soul. Well, eventually it becomes day, and all that night goes away, not just for 24 hours, but for good. You're letting this stuff go for good, not just in this lifetime, but pretty much forever. It's a very significant thing, this dark night of the soul, these crummy symptoms. They imply so much. Number 4 is almost equally as crummy as the dark night of the soul. These are just labels that we place on these multifaceted experiences. Don't get hung up on the names. I'm not trying to claim to be some kind of awakening scholar. But the void is it's a phase I call where it's similar to the dark night, but it's just like a really intense, sometimes prolonged melancholy, a joylessness, a boredom, a complete dissatisfaction of life. Not necessarily anything going really wrong. In fact, that can oftentimes be longed for and preferred than the void. The void is just like really depressing for no reason, in a sort of subtle, just I have nothing to live for kind of way. But again, nothing external to you seems to be all that provocative and causing that. It's just a melancholy that you can't shake. It makes it impossible to feel happy and joyful and motivated. Oftentimes we go into the void before we like birth into like a new chapter of our life. So in that sense, it's a very positive thing and a sign of progress, big time. Number 5 is intense uncertainty, doubt. I'll give you a good example, a good metaphor. I had a dream last night, and it was more symbolic. I feel pretty good. A lot of times dreams for me are like a precursor of stuff that's on its way up, but I can't quite see it consciously, so I'll start to dream about it. But anyway, the dream is a good metaphor for this uncertainty I speak of. And this can happen a lot in dreams as well. So I was like, I don't know, at the Sunset Cliffs here in San Diego, but for some reason the waves were coming like up over the cliffs. And we weren't getting wet. It was a dream, you know how it is. But it was like the feeling of like, oh crap, like the sea, the stormy wavy sea was like coming all around me, and it was just this feeling like, oh my goodness, this powerful, unpredictable, stormy sea is just sort of like, I'm barely hanging on at any moment. I can just get swept off. It was that kind of feeling. So that's kind of the uncertainty I'm speaking of. But again, that's usually because you're on the cusp of some new thing in life that you've probably been wanting for a long time, but you got to kind of bypass your own inner blocks, your inner doubt, your inner uncertainty, and it's just sort of, a lot of us are somewhat conditioned to fear the success, fear what we want the most, and we can kind of like have a little trepidation, and that can be experienced in a pretty intense way with the uncertainty. But again, on the other side of that is that thing you wanted, and then when it finally happens, you'll have shed that uncertainty and be ready for it so you can experience it in a full way. Number 6, it's when you start to surprise yourself, where this happens quite a bit. You'll replay out an old experience, an old scenario, an old cycle, an old situation, and perhaps your whole life you've reacted better put, to the scenario in a particular way that was, as you now would label, maybe dysfunctional, non-conducive to you growing spiritually, just not a way you want to prefer, but it was just a reaction, right? And all of a sudden you find that this scenario is playing out just as it used to. It's got a familiar air and scent to it, and you're like, wow, you're free to respond consciously as you please, as you choose. You're not so influenced by the conditioned emotional response to it, and you surprise yourself and say, wow, I can't believe that this is happening right all over the place. A lot of times when these things happen, it kind of happens in a dramatic way, and it's just like, just to really show you how much you've shed and how far you've come. So that is certainly a sign of progress. Number 7 is you find yourself becoming more self-reliant. You no longer need the validation from external sources, even your own spirit guides and synchronicity. You start to just trust yourself more. And of course, this comes and goes. But when you start to realize that you always could, but now even especially, because it's more clear, you can rely on yourself. You have all you need to do what you want to do in this life, to go after your purpose, your soulmates, everything you want, that you deem important. You possess the wherewithal to make it happen in a real, legitimate, practical, nuts and bolts, physical way. You can look back and see, wow, a lot of times the awakening externally, it feels like you're just stuck. It feels like things aren't budging in the external world, but even for a while you can like still look back and see, wow, and see how much you've changed internally. Our higher self oftentimes uses challenging scenarios and relationships and circumstances to keep us growing quickly. We all want to get over there. We all want to get to the end of the rainbow. But at the end of the rainbow, there's no more growth, and we just get bored and we're stuck. The negative, the tough stuff is what brings us up, that ascends us. But anyway, as you can see, most of those signs, 5 out of 7 or whatever, at least I would judge as regression. I'm doing something wrong. I must have taken a wrong turn. Why is this happening? I felt really positive the other day, and now I don't. And that negative perspective amplified the already somewhat inherent challenging aspects of all the things I mentioned to the max, and therefore made me miserable. I wish I could have gone back and slapped myself and said, listen, man, keep your life in the proper context and perspective. You know, these things come in cycles. It's like there's 2 heads to the coin. The clearing, the challenges, the dark night of the soul, the void, the symptoms, and then the times when you realize just how light you're becoming, how free, how emotionally liberated you're becoming. It's the same coin, okay? Both. Just because it's not only negative things imply success and progress, the positive ones do too, but most people tend to only think that the positive ones are the signs to look out for, when in fact it's both. So anyway, hopefully that video will help you put a positive spin on any of the challenges you might be going through, knowing they're going to just continue to allow you to live a much better life, a life more in sync with your own authentic preferences. So have an amazing day. Thank you all. Namaste. I'm holding my dog. It's like a one-handed namaste. Peace.